Following the conclusion of the Second World War, a pair of iron curtains were drawn across the European continent. One in the north, between the Rhine River, all the way down to the Swiss Alps, and one in the south, on the Rubicon. The European continent was split between the West and the East, through shrouds of capitalism and communism. Within the East, there was the Soviet Union, the puppet master of Eastern and Central Europe. The Soviets headed a defensive organization known as the Warsaw Pact. The Warsaw Pact's member states were exclusively the Soviet Union and their satellites. The satellites consisting of the Polish People's Republic, the Socialist Republic of Romania, the Hungarian People's Republic, the People's Republic of Yugoslavia, the People's Republic of Bulgaria, the People's Republic of Greece, the Democratic Republic of Italy, the German Democratic Republic, and the People's Republic of Denmark. The Warsaw Pact was initially founded in response to the formation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, a coalition of democratic, socialist, and nationalist Western nations who were against the Communist Internationale. The coalition consisted of the United States of America, the Fifth French Republic, the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, the Kingdom of Belgium, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, the Kingdom of Sardinia, the Kingdom of Two Sicilies, the United Provinces of Central Italy, the Republic of the Rhine, the People's Republic of San Marino, the Spanish State, the United Kingdom, the Republic of Greece and Cyprus, the Kingdom of Norway, and the Republic of Iceland. The United States and the Soviet Union would constantly be at odds, whether funding revolutions in foreign lands or fighting said revolutions. The US and Soviet Union were always head to head. The culmination of this hate came to its climax in May of 1975, approximately 21 years since the signing of the Paris Peace Treaty. The public were not aware that CIA officials and NATO High Command were plotting to put an end to the Red Menace. On May 3, 1975, a battalion consisting of American, Central Italian, Sardinian, and French soldiers attacked the Rubicon Army base at Salvignano sul Rubicon, the Democratic Republic of Italy. The battalion of Soviet-Italian troops stationed at the Rubicon Army base were completely caught off guard due to the nature of the attack, leading to a resounding defeat, which initiated the first push of the war. The successful push into Soviet Italy signaled to NATO High Command that a push into the entirety of the remainder of Italy was possible, and so it commenced. Operation Uproar. Nearly 3/4 of the nation was captured by the end of the month, leaving the Italian government to relocate national operations to Venice. Simultaneously, the Republic of the Rhine began an offensive into Germany. This was done in spite of the fact that NATO High Command had ordered the Rhinish Republic's commander, Hauptwachtpfeifen, to not make a push into Germany. The choice to commence this push is very easily the largest blunder of the war, not only because of what would come of it, but because of how much was gained out of it, that being occupying 12 German cities for 3 weeks. 12 German cities for nearly 300,000 lives. After the 3 weeks of occupation, German forces were able to locate a dead zone between the front line. This was due to the fact that there were no Rhinish soldiers present as they were reorganizing the front line. As a result, the German forces took advantage of this, beginning a blitz into the Rhine and then into France. It was almost as if it was 1940 all over again. Spring turned to summer. Bonn, Strasbourg, and Luxembourg fell to the hands of the Red Horde. With every passing day, tens of miles of NATO territory was occupied and held in the hands of the Warsaw Pact. In August, the Soviets had captured the Rhineland and had pushed NATO forces to the coast of the Netherlands, culminating in the Battle of Amsterdam, a heavy loss for NATO. While all of this was happening in the west, the Southern Front was much more successful. By December, the Warsaw Pact had their armies pushed back to the gates of Venice. NATO High Command was well aware that having one front prosper while the other one crumbled was not a sustainable method of war, especially when the enemy had significantly more area to lose than they had to take. Despite this defensive measure, bombing runs would still occur as the war in the air never truly ended. Come December, fresh American forces made their way to Europe, rushing to form a front line in the west. Soviet High Command attempted to continue to roll through Western Europe, yet they had underestimated the power held by the American forces, who, once fully arriving in Europe in December, were not able to be broken through. Over 750,000 American soldiers were on the front line that had now been formed. Come January, American forces managed to mount an effective mobile counteroffensive against the Warsaw Pact, taking advantage of resistance within the backlines and supply line issues that became more prominent the further into the west the Warsaw Pact pushed. Due to these factors, American soldiers did not have a very hard time finding and breaking through the weakest point of the front line, from where they managed to recapture northeastern France. Over the course of late January and February 1976, fresh American forces made an offensive play back into the occupied French territory, gradually making greater gains with less casualties taken each day. The culmination of the first Western offensive was two large-scale battles that occurred simultaneously, the Battle of Strasbourg and the Battle of the Meyer, both occurring on February 17, 1976. The first engagements of the Battle of Strasbourg occurred around 6:21 a.m., where NATO forces were met with a poorly fortified city housing nearly 80,000 Warsaw Pact soldiers, most of which had been on the Rhinish border prior to the initial breakthrough and blitz. The soldiers who were arriving to retake the city had no idea that the majority of the soldiers occupying Strasbourg had no weapons at all. This led to the Battle of Strasbourg being both a mass casualty battle as well as the battle with the highest number of soldiers taken prisoner by NATO forces of the entire war. Over 20,000 soldiers were eventually captured within the general area of Strasbourg and held as prisoners of war, with near 30,000 other soldiers dying, the remainder having fled the battlefield. As this bloodbath occurred in the south, another devastating battle occurred within the north, the Battle for the Meyer. The Battle for the Meyer had no definitive location, taking place within a mile-wide radius in northeastern France, near the border of Belgium. The battle had begun around 10:10 a.m. due to an attempt at a counter-offensive against the armies of NATO commenced by the Warsaw Pact. The battle raged on over the course of 2 days, where soldiers of both sides suffered immense casualties in an attempt to take and hold the Meyer. The combat within the Meyer was primarily characterized by uncoordinated guerrilla warfare, with tactics being utilized that took advantage of the bog the battle was fought in. When looking back on the battle, historians have deemed the battle to be the muddiest battle of the Third World War. NATO forces would eventually beat back the Soviet counteroffensive within 18 hours of its commencement. NATO lost approximately 3,500 soldiers within the Battle of the Meyer, whilst the Soviets lost approximately 4,000 soldiers. With the successive victories at Strasbourg and the Meyer, NATO soldier morale was higher than ever. As to the soldiers, it felt as if they'd be in Berlin by Easter. NATO High Command deemed the first counteroffensive, the Western counteroffensive, to be a resounding success, prompting the continuation of the counteroffensive going into September of 1976. In this time, NATO forces would recapture Luxembourg City and Brussels while managing to reconnect with an encirclement that held out in Rotterdam. By March, NATO soldiers were breaking back into the Rhinish Republic. At the same time, various naval battles occurred within the eastern Mediterranean, each battle consisting of the mass destruction of the mass-produced Soviet Kilo-class submarine, leading to a series of amphibious invasions and landings on the Adriatic coast of Greece. Within the Eastern Bloc, resentment was stirring amongst the populace. The Soviet economy, that which reflected the entirety of the Warsaw Pact's economies, suffered as a result of a loss of access to the Mediterranean, which granted them access to the Suez Canal. Following World War II, the Warsaw Pact began to grow more dependent on trade with nations that could only be accessed through the usage of the Suez Canal. As a result of not being able to access the Mediterranean Sea, having been blocked off by Greek and British naval forces, nearly half of all trading done by the Soviet Union had been immediately vanquished. This, combined with the growing food scarcity caused by constant bombing raids done by the various air forces of NATO, as well as the cutting off of the Suez Canal from Soviet shipping, led to resentment boiling over within the USSR and her satellites. Sofia, Belgrade, Varna, Nice, Zagreb, Warsaw, Krakow, Kiev, Berlin, Prague, Budapest, Bucharest. Calls for revolution were heard through each city. Calls for freedom, liberty, and independence. Historically, when revolutions would occur within Eastern Europe, the Soviet Union would put them down with military force. But their military was busy and occupied. They did not see it as tenable. They thought it undoable. A strategic and defensive mistake by all means. Yet it was done anyway. The Soviet Union ordered various battalions off of the front line and into the protesting cities, not all of them, but many of them, to kill all protesters and return to the front line. Not only did this create issues of morale and morality within the army of the Warsaw Pact itself, but it also only led to the stirring of further dissent between the people of the Warsaw Pact. Croatia, Slovenia, and Serbia all declared independence from the People's Republic of Yugoslavia as a result of the Soviet suppression. After multiple months of planning and preparing, the Yugoslav revolutions caused NATO High Command to commence Operation Hypoxia. The Italian front was poorly managed by the Warsaw Pact, leading to countless victories in battle for NATO, who managed to capture Venice within 1 week of the offensive, causing the People's Republic of Italy to collapse. With the area between no longer occupied, it was possible for NATO to offer support to Slovenia and Croatia. NATO managed to rout countless men to assist in the Slovenian and Croatian revolutions, drawing the nations closer to NATO without needing to grant them entry into the alliance proper. NATO High Command's plans were simple. They wished to commit a spearhead to Novi Sad where they would resupply their forces, then spearhead to Belgrade, resupply once more, and spearhead to Nice, resupplying before the final spearhead to Tirana. They intended for Yugoslavia to be held in a proverbial chokehold, surrounded by NATO via land and sea. Only then would they close in and exterminate the Red Menace from the West Balkan. Operation Hypoxia commenced simultaneously with Operation Jaeger, the offensive to retake Bonn and thereafter take Wilhelmshaven and Hamburg. At this point in time, plans were being drafted for the capture of Berlin, though that would still be many months away. The sudden attack caught the already battered and weakened armies of the Warsaw Pact off guard, once again leading to a large number of NATO military victories. Operation Hypoxia was enacted in order to cut off and encircle the remnant forces loyal to the Warsaw Pact within the rebelling Yugoslavia and to kick the door in on Albania. This was to be achieved by the usage of various defensive spearheads, led by mobile units that would go from town to town, capturing territory and damaging supply lines. Of course, this means that as more fighting continued within the encircled zone, there were less and less supplies for the already starved Yugoslav forces. The Air Force was utilized in bombing runs of supply lines all across the outside of the captured territory, making the final push into Yugoslavia possible. Soldiers loyal to the Warsaw Pact would fight ruthlessly, But it was not enough, as winter turned to spring, and spring turned to summer. The West Balkan would be occupied by NATO forces by August. At the same time, the remaining Alpine army would break through the quite pitiful front line managed by the Warsaw Pact in Tyrol, beginning the push into Central Europe. Once August came, it was as if the war was already over. The forces of the Warsaw Pact were shown to be completely incapable of repelling the advances of NATO at every opportunity they had. They played their cards well, got lucky, and still failed to truly repel the forces of the West. In August alone, the city of Bonn was recaptured by NATO forces during the Second Battle of Bonn, and on top of that, Sofia, Bratislava, Prague, Athens, Hamburg, Budapest, Nuremberg, and Vienna all fell. On September 1st, 1976, the Scandinavian Socialist Federal Republic joined the war as well, officially joining NATO 2 days later on the 3rd of September. Scandinavia would begin two offensives that they would manage alone, the push into Denmark and the push into Karelia. It was a goal of the Scandinavians to be able to unify all of the Scandinavian region in order to perpetuate a democratic socialist state that unified the northern lights of Europe. On December 13, 1976, after 4 months of pushing and fighting, Berlin was captured by NATO forces. In all reality, it would have likely happened sooner if it was not for the guerrilla warfare techniques that would be utilized by the German and Soviet armies in order to try and hold out for as long as possible. On January 22, 1977, the People's Republic of Poland was couped by the Polish Republic, technically declaring freedom from the Warsaw Pact, immediately aligning itself to NATO and opening talks with the Polish Republic government in exile. It's rather hard to put into words how devastated the Soviet army and economy was at this point. Throughout February to May of 1977, the Soviet Union was getting constantly pummeled by NATO, though, with time, the Soviet Union started to turn into a brick wall. The Soviets began to organize a line that was taking advantage of their large numbers, as it was one of the only advantages they had left. May passed. So did June. July as well. August, September, October, November, December, January, February, and lastly, March. For the last 11 months, the forces of NATO and the remaining forces of the Warsaw Pact were dug deep into trenches. The Soviets were the first to utilize chemical gas attacks, which only egged on NATO to do the same. And for the rest of the duration of the war, chemical gas attacks were commonplace. The horrors of warfare were not only felt by the soldiers, but the civilians too. Across the whole front, Russians watched as their homes and land were destroyed. Their farms were ransacked, and their land was salted in order to avoid a successful Soviet counterattack, using what was left of the land. There were no winners during this phase of the war. Every man was a loser, for every man would leave the trenches as a different man than the man they were whilst digging. Every man was the gravedigger of his own crypt. Every man was a victim of his brother's own evils. Every man a pile of bones in the infernal pit of agony that was the trenches of West Russia. Though one day, it all ended. NATO High Command requested the immediate withdrawal of forces near Moscow and St. Petersburg. There were no questions answered, but many questions asked. All that the men on the ground knew was that there was an immediate evacuation mandate put in place for all military personnel near the cities, and so they left. Soviets were perplexed by this, figuring it to be some sort of trap. Most generals and field marshals kept their forces within the trenches, believing that this was an elaborate trap, an attempt to break the stalemate, an appeal to God. Soon enough, though, commanders chose to investigate why the enemy abandoned their positions. It didn't make sense. It had to be a trap. But in spite of it all, every scout returned to their trench unharmed. This motivated and led to the Soviets' final counterattack. On March 31st, 1977, the United States of America, in collaboration with the MK Plan Corporation as well as NASA, commenced the first set of large-scale solar bombardments in human history. In just a moment, just a second, with everything all at once, was something. Then there was nothing. The capital and the pride of the USSR, the cities of which the government was built upon, the home of the revolution. Both cities have been wiped off the face of the earth in its entirety. There was nothing left in Moscow, nor St. Petersburg. It was over in an instant, though what came after went on for much, much longer. The people heard it first, straight from the mouth of President Carter. Yesterday, I authorized the usage of an experimental weapon of mass destruction against the Soviet Union. I do believe that it was the necessary course of action required to prevent the loss of millions of our men's lives, though it does not justify the extreme loss of life experienced by those within the cities that were stricken. We don't know how many people died, though estimates state it to be within the millions, an approximate of 90 to 95% of the population within Moscow and Leningrad. We committed ourselves to this course of action to put an end to the tyrannical government that ruled the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe as a whole. We cut the head off the bear as we've eliminated the majority of the government of the Soviet Union. We're in talks with the emergency government to sound peace and bring an end to the bloodshed. If all goes well, it ends here. While not guaranteed, I do hope that we can come to an agreement in order to bring a return to peace. Perhaps it was of just cause. Perhaps it was of hatred, the hatred of everything the USSR stood for. Perhaps it was of logic, putting together ethical puzzle pieces in order to come to a conclusion of what would be worse, to do or not to do. Regardless of what it was, it instantly shattered the USSR like a piece of fine china dropped on the floor. On paper, the USSR lived on. After all, they had diplomats present at the Brussels Peace Conference. Regardless, the war ended in Brussels, where the powers discussed what would come of Europe and the USSR.